You spread it on toast every morning. Your mum gave it to you as a kid. It's in practically every Australian cupboard. Vegemite, the dark brown spread we've trusted for generations. But when you actually stop and look at what's inside that iconic yellow jar, something doesn't quite add up. And what I found when I dug deeper completely changed how I see it. Vegemite isn't just some random spread, it's woven into our national identity. We grow up believing it's wholesome, it's ours, it's good for us. The marketing tells us it's packed with B vitamins, but here's the thing. If this spread is so incredibly healthy and natural, why does it need so many ingredients that most of us can't even pronounce? I started this investigation the same way you probably would. Standing in my kitchen, jar in hand, actually reading the label properly for the first time in years. Yeast extract, salt, vegetable extract. Okay, that sounds reasonable. But then you keep reading. Flavor enhancers, color additives, preservatives. For something that's supposed to be a simple, wholesome Australian product, there's a lot more going on here than we've been led to believe. Now, before we go any further, let me be clear. I'm not here to tell you Vegemite is poison, or that you should throw out your jar immediately. That's not what this is about. What this is about is understanding what we're putting in our bodies and our kids' bodies every day. Because most of us have never really questioned it. We just accepted it because it's Vegemite. It's Australian. It must be fine. But let's talk about what Vegemite actually is at its core. The main ingredient is yeast extract. Sounds natural enough, right? Except the process is anything but simple. They take brewer's yeast, a waste product from beer manufacturing, and break it down using autolysis. The yeast cells are heated until they rupture and release their contents. Then that mixture gets concentrated and processed into the thick, dark paste we recognize. During that concentration, something happens to the sodium content. A single teaspoon contains around 165 milligrams of sodium. That's about 7% of your recommended daily intake, from 1 teaspoon. And let's be honest, how many of us stick to just 1 teaspoon? When you're spreading it on toast, it's easy to use 2 or 3 times that amount without thinking. The Australian Heart Foundation recommends we keep daily sodium intake below 2,000 milligrams. For children, that number is even lower. A couple of pieces of Vegemite toast for breakfast, and a young child could be getting close to a quarter of their daily sodium limit before leaving for school. And that's not counting the salt in anything else they eat throughout the day. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but what about all those B vitamins we keep hearing about? Isn't Vegemite supposed to be this amazing source of nutrition? And yes, it does contain B vitamins. Thiamine, riboflavin, niacin, folate, they're all there. But here's what they don't tell you. Those vitamins aren't naturally occurring in high concentrations from the yeast extraction. They're added, fortified. The Vegemite you're eating has been supplemented with synthetic vitamins to boost its nutritional profile. There's nothing inherently wrong with fortified foods. Plenty of products do it. But it does change the narrative. We've been sold this idea of Vegemite as this wholesome, natural Australian product bursting with goodness, when in reality, it's a heavily processed food product with added nutrients to make it appear healthier. Let's dig into some of the other ingredients that don't get much attention. There's something listed as 621. That's the food additive code for monosodium glutamate. MSG. Now, MSG has a complicated reputation. Some people are sensitive to it, experiencing headaches or other reactions. Most scientific studies back its safety for the general population. But it's a flavor enhancer. It's there to make the product taste better than it would naturally. We're moving further away from this idea of a simple, natural spread. Then there's the color. Vegemite's distinctive dark brown color doesn't come entirely from the yeast extract. There's added color, listed as 150. That's caramel coloring. It's used in countless food products, from soft drinks to sauces, generally recognized as safe. But it's another processed addition to a product that markets itself on being natural and Australian. I wanted to understand why we've never really questioned any of this. So I looked into the history. Vegemite was created in 1922 by Cyril Callister, a chemist working for the Fred Walker Company. Australia was looking for a homegrown alternative to British Marmite, especially after supply issues during World War I. Vegemite was positioned from the start as the Australian answer, the patriotic choice. The marketing campaigns over the decades have been brilliant. Happy Little Vegemites, the Vegemite song that every Australian knows. Sponsorships of sports teams and national events. It's been embedded in our cultural identity to the point where questioning Vegemite almost feels like questioning Australia itself. When a product becomes synonymous with national pride, we stop looking at it critically. But here's something that made me pause. In 2017, Bega Cheese acquired Vegemite from Mondelez International. Before that, it had been owned by Kraft, and before Kraft, it was Unilever. These are massive multinational corporations. The iconic Australian spread hasn't been owned by an Australian company for most of its existence. It's been passed around between global food giants like any other commercial product. That doesn't necessarily change what's in the jar, but it does challenge this narrative of wholesome Australian authenticity we've been fed. What really struck me while researching this ownership history was how the formula has changed over the decades. Not dramatically, but subtly. Each new owner made minor adjustments, tweaked the process, optimized for cost and shelf stability. The Vegemite your grandparents ate in the 1950s wasn't quite the same product you're eating now. The core concept is the same, but the specific formulation, the exact ingredients, the manufacturing process, all of that has evolved. Yet the marketing has always stayed the same. Always wholesome. Always Australian. Always traditional. I tried to get specific information from Bega about their current manufacturing process. How exactly is the yeast extract produced? What quality controls are in place? Where do the added vitamins come from? How much of the production is automated versus handcrafted? The responses I got were polite but vague. Corporate speak about proprietary processes and quality standards. Nothing concrete. Nothing that would actually let consumers understand what goes into making this product they trust so implicitly. That lack of transparency is telling. When a company's entire brand is built on tradition and trustworthiness, you'd think they'd be eager to show how carefully and thoughtfully their product is made. Instead, it's all carefully guarded trade secrets and marketing messages. That made me wonder what they don't want us to know. Now, let's talk about how we actually use Vegemite, because I think that's where some of the biggest concerns emerge. The recommended serving size is about 5 grams, which is roughly 1 teaspoon. But watch anyone make Vegemite toast. Watch yourself make it. Most people spread it thick. They're using 3, 4, maybe 5 times that amount. Suddenly, that sodium content isn't 7% of your daily intake anymore. It's potentially a quarter or more, just from breakfast. And here's something else that bothered me when I started really paying attention. The serving size recommendations on the jar are deliberately conservative. They know people use more. They've done the consumer research. They've watched how Australians actually consume their product. But keeping that official serving size small makes the nutritional information look better than it really is in practice. It's a common trick in the food industry. Make the serving size unrealistically small so the numbers don't look as concerning. Think about it this way. When was the last time you measured out exactly 1 teaspoon of Vegemite? Never, right? You just spread it on. You go by feel, by taste, by what looks right to you. And what looks right to most of us is substantially more than what the jar suggests. I actually did an experiment at home. I made toast the way I normally would, then scraped off the Vegemite and measured it. I was using nearly 3 teaspoons without even realizing it. That's almost 500 milligrams of sodium from toast before I'd had anything else to eat. When I started asking other Australians about their Vegemite habits, I heard the same thing over and over. Nobody measures it. Nobody thinks about portion size. It's just Vegemite. You spread it on and you eat it. And that's exactly the problem. We've been so thoroughly convinced of its wholesomeness that we don't apply the same caution we might to other high-sodium foods. And it's not just the sodium. It's the fact that we're starting kids on this stuff when they're toddlers. We're training their taste buds to crave salty, intensely flavored foods from a very young age. There's research suggesting that early exposure to high-sodium foods can influence taste preferences for life, potentially leading to a preference for saltier foods in adulthood. We might be setting up future generations for higher sodium consumption without even realizing it. I spoke to a nutritionist off the record, someone who works with Australian families on improving their diets. She told me something that stuck with me. She said, Vegemite is one of those products where the cultural attachment is so strong that families get defensive when it's questioned. Parents feel like they're doing something good by giving their kids Vegemite because that's what their parents did. It's tradition. It's normal. But normal doesn't always mean healthy. She went on to explain something fascinating about how food preferences develop in childhood. When you give a child intensely flavored, salty foods from a young age, you're essentially training their palate to expect and crave those strong flavors. It's not just about Vegemite specifically. It's about what Vegemite represents in terms of flavor intensity and sodium levels. Kids who grow up eating Vegemite regularly often find that milder, whole foods taste bland by comparison. They've been conditioned to need that hit of salt and umami to find food satisfying. This isn't speculation or fear-mongering. There's actual research on this. Studies have shown that early dietary patterns can influence taste preferences well into adulthood. If you spend your childhood eating foods high in sodium, you're more likely to prefer high-sodium foods as an adult. And those preferences are incredibly hard to change later in life. They're formed during critical developmental windows when your brain is learning what food should taste like. So when we give our toddlers Vegemite toast every morning, we might think we're giving them something nutritious and Australian. But we're also potentially setting them up for a lifetime of preferring heavily processed, salty foods. That's a big consequence for something we do so casually, so automatically, without ever really thinking about it. The thing is, there are genuine nutrients in Vegemite. The B vitamins, even if they're added, are still beneficial. Folate is important for cell growth and development. Thiamine supports energy metabolism. Niacin is essential for nervous system health. These are real benefits, but you can get all of these vitamins from whole foods, from a balanced diet that doesn't come with the same sodium load. A slice of whole grain toast with avocado and a poached egg gives you protein, healthy fats, fiber, and yes, B vitamins too, without the processed additives. And here's something that really opened my eyes. Those fortified B vitamins that Vegemite is so proud of? The synthetic versions used in food fortification aren't always absorbed by the body, in the same way as naturally occurring vitamins from whole foods. Your body recognizes and uses nutrients from real food more efficiently than it does isolated synthetic vitamins added to processed products. So even the main nutritional claim Vegemite makes, that it's rich in B vitamins, isn't quite as straightforward as the marketing suggests. I started looking at the cost, too. Vegemite isn't cheap for what you're actually getting, which is essentially flavored yeast paste with added salt and vitamins. You're paying a premium. And why? Because of the brand. Because of the marketing. Because of decades of advertising that convinced us this product is special, essential, uniquely Australian. You're paying for nostalgia and national pride packaged in a jar. The actual ingredients are incredibly cheap to produce. Yeast extract is literally a waste product from brewing. The markup on Vegemite is substantial, but we don't question it because we've been taught not to question it. Think about how much money Australian families spend on Vegemite over a lifetime. A jar every few weeks or months, year after year, decade after decade. It adds up. And what are we getting for that money? A product we could easily replace with whole food alternatives that would cost less and provide better nutrition. But we don't, because Vegemite has become more than just a food product. It's become part of our identity, and you can't put a price on identity. Except corporations can, and they do. Here's what really got me thinking, though. The Australian Dietary Guidelines recommend limiting intake of foods high in sodium. They emphasize whole foods, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, lean proteins. Nowhere do they specifically recommend yeast spreads or heavily processed foods. Yet Vegemite has this health halo around it. People genuinely believe they're making a nutritious choice by eating it. The marketing has been so effective that we've conflated cultural significance with nutritional value. And then there's the question of alternatives. Not long ago, I went a month without buying Vegemite. Didn't ban it completely, just didn't have it in the house. Know what happened? Nothing. I didn't miss it. My kids complained for about 3 days, and then forgot about it. We found other things to put on toast. Nut butters, cottage cheese, tomato and basil, hummus. Things with actual whole food ingredients. That experience made me realize our attachment to Vegemite isn't really about taste or nutrition. It's about identity and habit. It's about feeling Australian. And food companies know this. They know that if they can tie their product to your sense of identity, you'll keep buying it regardless of what's in it. It becomes self-sustaining. But what if we started separating those things? What if we could appreciate Vegemite as part of our cultural history without making it a daily dietary staple? You can acknowledge that something is iconic and traditional while also recognizing it might not be the healthiest choice for regular consumption. I'm not saying throw out your Vegemite. What I am saying is maybe it's time we stopped treating it like it's above scrutiny just because it's Australian. Maybe we should read the label, understand what we're eating, and make informed choices rather than defaulting to tradition. When you actually break it down, Vegemite is a highly processed food product with significant sodium content, added vitamins, flavor enhancers, and artificial coloring. It's owned by a large corporation that profits from our cultural attachment to it. It's marketed as healthy, based on added B vitamins you can easily get from whole food sources. None of this makes it dangerous, but it does make it far less wholesome than we've been led to believe. The real question isn't whether Vegemite will hurt you if you eat it occasionally. The question is whether we should be giving it to ourselves and our kids every single day without a second thought, purely because it's what we've always done. And I think when you look at it objectively, when you strip away the nostalgia and the clever marketing and the cultural weight, the answer becomes a lot less clear than it used to be. What bothers me most isn't even Vegemite itself. It's what Vegemite represents about how we relate to food in modern Australia. We've let marketing and tradition override our common sense and our ability to think critically about what we consume. We've confused cultural identity with nutritional value. We've allowed a corporation to profit enormously from our sense of national pride while delivering a product that's fundamentally just processed yeast paste with a lot of salt. And this pattern extends beyond Vegemite. How many other foods do we accept without question because they're familiar, because they're traditional, because questioning them feels somehow disloyal or un-Australian? How many times do we choose processed convenience over whole food nutrition because that's just what everyone does? How often do we feed our families based on habit and marketing rather than actual nutritional science? I'm not trying to make anyone feel guilty. I've been just as complacent as anyone else. I've spread Vegemite on my kids' toast hundreds of times without thinking twice. I've sung the Vegemite song. I've felt that warm glow of Australian pride when I see that yellow jar. But somewhere along the way, I realized that warm feeling was getting in the way of making informed choices about my family's health. Australian families deserve to know what they're actually consuming. We deserve transparency, not just tradition. We deserve to make choices based on facts, not feelings of national pride cultivated by advertising. Vegemite isn't going anywhere. It's too embedded in our culture. But maybe we can start having honest conversations about what it really is and whether our daily habits around it serve our health or just our sense of identity. The next time you reach for that yellow and red jar, maybe take a second to think about why. Is it because you genuinely want it, because it nourishes you? Or is it just habit? Just what you've always done? There's no wrong answer, but there should be an intentional answer. Because at the end of the day, what we put in our bodies matters. What we teach our kids about food matters. And sometimes the most Australian thing we can do isn't blindly following tradition. It's asking questions, demanding better, and making choices that serve us, even when those choices challenge something as sacred as Vegemite.